Hi, so I've just come off a call with Mark Can. Mark is the founder and CEO of Growth Warriors, and I've been on podcasts with Mark in the past. We've discussed everything from go-to-market strategies all the way to how we can help CMOs within very pressurized private equity-backed companies and, the best routes to take within those markets. But today is something slightly different. He's analyzed 5,000 direct messages from LinkedIn, and he's run them through an AI tool. And rather than me waffle on about it, let's get into the episode. This is Perspectives. Welcome. Mark, how the devil are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Reg?
Yeah, I'm good. So I am absolutely intrigued by this project you were working on recently,
Yep.
where you, I'm going to get you to talk about it, but you analyzed some LinkedIn data using AI. Can you give us a bit of an overview of what you did and what prompted you to do it?
Yeah, of course. So I analysed just under 5,000 DMs. I'll go a little bit into more detail of like how I
Sure.
sort of came to that number.
Yeah.
And yeah, the whole reason around it was just that in B2B marketing, sending cold email is getting harder. And in general, LinkedIn DMs, I think, are kind of an underserved channel. A lot of people try it and it doesn't work very well. And so they kind of give up on it. And so I thought I'd do an analysis using kind of an export from my LinkedIn, and then using Claude AI to basically analyze, but taking into account a number of different factors rather than just a very simple prompt and then hit return and wait for it to come back. I had to put a bit more effort into the project and the analysis around that, to make sure there was kind of no anomalies or just. I'll give you an example. There was conversations between friends that had decided to, we're connected on LinkedIn or with
Yes.
peers, and they decide, to use LinkedIn as the equivalent of WhatsApp, and therefore that interfered with the data. So I had to go through and ask to exclude those names of people in order to get like an accurate data set. And then the other thing I did is anybody who connected with me and then sent me kind of a pitch or some kind of request, then I excluded those people because essentially I wanted to see what connection DMs I'd sent. So that was kind of that was a few of the criteria that I came across.
That's fantastic. And you were just saying that I just want to sort of expand on something you said a little bit earlier before we go right into this amazing what the outcomes and what the findings were, which I think people are going to find fascinating. But you mentioned that cold email and cold outreach is getting much harder.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that and why you think that might be the situation, why that might be the case?
Of course, yeah. I think it's a number of factors. I think AI related to the email service providers like Gmail, Microsoft, they're getting cleverer in terms of detecting what a templated email is. What a cold email is versus what isn't a cold email. I think the costs are going up. So Apollo.io was recently their LinkedIn company page was basically banned. You go to it and it had a 404 error. And so Apollo, for those who don't know, is traditionally relied on people Apollo scraped LinkedIn's data to then provide that as part of like a software as a service monthly cost. And so the price of data is going up as a result of that. I think Apollo raised their prices shortly after that, because it's probably harder to get data now. And I just think the cost of sending emails a lot cheaper. So people do a lot more of it because of the different technologies that have come around, the different software that has enabled automation. Has really just meant that people who are reading these emails are more vigilant and they can spot a templated email from a mile away now. And so I think that part of it, and then just in general, I think the way that people approach email, cold outbound email, they don't really approach it any differently than they would do an existing warm contact. And so
Right.
therefore the response rates are dropping, and you find that basically like the opinion will be cold email doesn't work, or it used to work and now it doesn't. I think it was just a lot easier before, and I think it getting
Mm.
harder might actually be a good thing in some ways if it means that people have to send their emails that actually are useful and valuable and for the end recipient, the buyer, basically.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. And you said on top of that, there was something to do with mailboxes. You think people at Microsoft and Gmail are getting far clever in terms of what they may deem as spam. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. So they've got obviously Gmail have like and Microsoft, they have like this huge database of email users, and so using their respective AI, so Gemini,
Mm.
Copilot, they can basically use that technology to analyze like millions and millions of email accounts and emails sent within there, and kind of understand like what spam looks like and what it doesn't, basically.
Okay, okay, fantastic. So you were sat there with all these different challenges, and I know you're a big Clay advocate. You're very good at using a whole variety of a different sort of tech stack that you have
Yeah.
there, and an AI stack that you've built over the years, and a specialist in Clay. So what I thought would be good is just if you talk me through the your project first, and now that we've looked at why you got there, and then maybe you can after that we can have a separate conversation about Clay and what your tech stack looks like as well, and how you work with it. So
Yeah.
tell me about the project.
So the project was using Claude AI, so it's run by Anthropic. And basically, like you can put larger data sets in Claude AI if you're on the Pro plan. You can also do that on OpenAI as well, but I just chose to use Claude. And basically, you can launch projects and you can give it instructions around those projects. And so, my approach to it was to look at producing examples every time it basically like returned something from my prompt. So every time it returned an answer, I would say, oh, okay, why has that happened? And I would keep looking at different factors that basically affected the true kind of response rate, as it were. And so that led me to several different findings, which we can kind of go through. Um,
Okay.
but essentially, yeah, I think what you exclude as part of the prompt is more important than necessarily like what you ask it, because what you ask it is only a small part of it. There's so many different factors. So um, one of them was like exclude anything that is like directions to an event, as an example.
Okay.
Another
Okay.
one
Yeah. Yeah.
was
Yeah.
we mentioned, exclude from these people that I've shared the highest number of messages with. So generally, for the purposes of lead generation or like basically booking either a call for networking or a discovery call, it would generally be a much shorter message exchange. So that would kind of be one of the factors. Obviously, the words used within it as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's
Fantastic.
quite a lot there. Yeah.
Fantastic. So all of this happened. So what came out? What was the kind of what were the key findings?
So the key findings were message length. I think it was really interesting. So what if it was 1 to 10 words, it was like a 68% response rate, and then basically higher than that was 51 to 100 words had an 87% response rate, and then after that it goes down to like 49% or below for all of the different variants. So I did it between 1 to 10, and then variants of 100 words plus, and it was like different, word lengths for each of those categories, basically. And then, so yeah, so basically, I would say being either ultra brief or the medium length performed really, really well. And then,
Okay.
yeah, so that was kind of one part of it. And then obviously you've got time zone differences, which is always challenging in terms of
Yes.
analysis. But what I found is the response rate was higher on Monday, Tuesdays. And generally,
So Monday and Tuesdays are the best times to send send a LinkedIn message, LinkedIn outreach.
yeah. So basically, that there's the time that it's sent, but also
Okay.
the reference of when you look to basically like do a follow up as an example.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. And what other things were coming out of this? I mean, was there any sort of specific topics or subjects that were really resonating or getting more engagement? Or was there any other?
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting ones was humor versus conventional messages. So there was,
Okay.
yeah,
I
basically
like it.
like humor. Not a huge amount of my data set was actually like humorous messages, but it was
Mhm.
like a small test that I went through. But for that small test, I found that actually the response rates were particularly higher, but then because I didn't send enough of them, it was inconclusive. So that kind of brings up a whole host of questions around like who is it that you're messaging, whether they get the humor or not, cultural differences. There's all sorts there, but so that was probably one of the
Okay.
areas where it wasn't conclusive enough, but I still thought it
Mm.
was interesting enough that it was worth kind of basically a test.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think one of the challenges I have on LinkedIn is that um, you have an assumption of what you believe that person is going to sort of engage with or not. And I think sometimes you get a very you always end up getting a bit of a mixed bag, don't you? In terms of uh, your assumptions are totally go out the window. When you actually look at the cold hard data that you've done, you
Yeah.
can actually see the reality of it is something probably not as long and as eloquent that you think you're spending all this time writing, but could actually be a very short, sharp kind of message. Would you see that that was the case as
Yeah,
well?
definitely. And also, like, I think one of the other areas that I think people are more interested in highlighting problems than they are necessarily being presented with a solution. And the data showed
Right,
that
right.
DMs that had problem mentions only performed at 87% response rate versus
Wow.
solution mentions performed at 54%, basically. So kind of gives you
Okay.
an idea that there was quite a difference in that. And then the lowest response rate was actually both the problem and the solution. So it's almost like people want
Mhm.
to be understood, but they don't want you to solve their problem. They just want you to understand
Right.
the problem before it goes any further. So I would say that
Okay.
it's almost like DMs are a conversation starter, but not necessarily the platform to continue them on forever, unless it's somebody that if you've got the purpose of trying to book a networking call or a discovery call.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point, Mark. I think people use a one size fits all. It's if you're sending out a cold email, it's going to have a different, the way you react to a response is going to be different compared to a LinkedIn message, even where someone's actually made a connection request with you and you're looking to nurture that relationship in a genuine way, as opposed to some sort of disingenuous type of, hey, just saw you like such and such. Oh, by the way, can I flog you my stuff? But
Yeah,
equally, if you, when you and I met recently in Portsmouth and we had a meeting, we engaged in a completely different way. There was none of this kind of, those kind of things. You see those kind of comedy sketches of if LinkedIn was a comedy, if LinkedIn was a TV program, what would it be like? Something LinkedIn was real, but it's so true. But people still do it. I think my um, biggest challenges is that because there are so many AI tools out there, because there are so many different tools that allow you to scrape things, people have become lazy. But I think this fight back that you're talking about, or not fight back is probably the wrong word, but this kind of response that's coming from the email box providers
yeah.
and various other things like LinkedIn, sort of putting the kibosh and things. Do you think that's A, going to lead to people having to get more creative? And B, do you think it will whittle out the laziness.
Yeah, I think it will because if you look at LinkedIn in particular, once you've connected with somebody, then
Mm.
you can personalize to a certain extent, but really it's a case of like you can't personalize a conversation ongoing. I think there was a case that I saw posted on I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody I was connected with in LinkedIn where they sort of did a screenshot and sort of called out like a bot for DMing essentially because none of it really made sense on the responses, so it didn't work particularly well, and it wouldn't do either. I don't think at this stage because if you just mention something that's off script, it didn't basically come back with any kind of sensible response. So I think DMs are still kind of an area which I, I'm sure they will get automated at some point, and people have built tools to try. But really, it's a case of you know the. I don't think necessarily the conversations are going to go on for a long time on a DM. I think it's more of a point to get people off of LinkedIn. If that makes sense.
Right, right.
So, and I
Okay.
also think that if you don't do the other parts of LinkedIn and you just do DMs, then people look back on your profile and they can't really find anything, and they don't know what it is that you do, that kind of thing. Then that affects things as well. Um, but yeah, I still think there's this kind of almost like a divide between those who think it's all about posting content and commenting, and you will get somebody DM you as a result, and that does work if you've got enough reach. And then there's the other school of thought that is kind of LinkedIn is a direct sales network that you can connect with somebody and then send them a message, and you don't really need to do anything else. And I think it's probably a happy medium somewhere in between. You do need content, you do need to post so that people can see what it is that you do and what your opinions are, that kind of thing. But I also think being proactive is always a good strategy rather than waiting for inbound.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. So that is fascinating, and I'm sure we're going to come back and have a more detailed discussion about some of your findings that you did using AI or using Claude to interrogate a lot of your DMs over such a long period of time. That's a huge data set, and I think that we can go into a little bit more detail. Just to round things off, because I always try and keep these things to about sort of half an hour. I think that's the capacity for most people's um, uh, learning, if you like. But tell me about Clay. Tell me, I'm reading about Clay all the time. People are talking about this as being the new go-to market um, strategy or thrust, if you like.
Yeah.
And really, Clay engineers are becoming go-to-market engineers. And for those who don't know what Clay is and what it might mean to them, can you just give a broad overview first, and then go into how Clay works and how you, as an expert, actually use it and help deliver
Yeah.
value for people?
Well, I think one good way I saw that they describe like how it's used is that essentially, if you look at every profession, if you're a graphic designer, then you're using Photoshop or you're using Figma. If
Yes.
you're, a web developer, you've got your platform that you use, and really like go to market marketers or engineers, they haven't had kind of a platform that they can basically like essentially put things together. So I think the best way to describe it is like Google. It's like Google Sheets, but on steroids. It's kind of got every single
Right.
column is actually
Turbocharged.
yeah,
Yeah.
every single column is connected to an API. So it could
Right.
be that you want to access the open web more. So for example, you could do research and you could connect to the Crunchbase API as an example. It could be that you want to see technographics of a company and see like what sort of software tools that they use, and so you can connect to the built with API as an example. And
Nice.
another way that it's used a lot is around kind of research and web research. So you can basically use OpenAI, and you can use Anthropic API as well, which is Claude, to basically go off and research different websites. And use
Okay.
prompts
Okay.
to come back with really useful information. So that could be clients that companies work with. It could be
Hmm.
case studies that got featured on the website. Or it could be simply to qualify if they're the right type of company based on how they describe themselves on the website. And so, yeah, you haven't been able to do this without sort of heavy coding knowledge, I would say, for some time. And I think it does have a bit of a learning curve, Clay, hence why you have Clay consultants. Um,
Yes.
but it's incredibly, if you can think of one thing that you want to do, then Clay can probably do it. And that's the better way to think of it rather than a set of features.
Right. So it's quite a statement. It's quite a statement. So hypothetically, you have a situation where you have different APIs coming into Clay.
Yep.
Once that data comes in, how do you interrogate that data to make sense of it, to create a meaningful piece of content or that you can then push out to engage people?
Yeah, of course. So I think the first thing is coming up with what you want as the end result. So,
Mhm.
one example could be, that the company is hiring. And so if you can basically find those job listings or find companies that are showing some kind of intent by going, we're hiring for these growth related roles or marketing related roles. And then another way could be you research and find people who are already in the team, and then kind of list that as part of your personalization. And so that could be a way of like getting sort of cut through and making sure that people like respond or at least acknowledge that you've sent an outreach email.
Right.
And that you could then repeat that hundreds or thousands of times, depending on how many leads are available in your total
Gotcha.
addressable market. So that's like one way you could do it. And then I've seen recently really creative use cases by integrating like Canva and then integrating that with web research and being able to like put the two together or create a video or a personalized image. There's so many different use cases of it, but it's got to be
Mm.
kind of relevant and not just a gimmick, I think, in terms of what it is, the reason that you're including that personalization. And it's normally problem solving. So normally one type of decision maker who's got a similar job title at a similar type of company will have similar problems. A decision maker at a very much larger company or much smaller company will have very different problems, and it's just making sure that you can actually segment well enough to be able to sort of have a different message for those two or three different types of personas.
Fantastic. Mark, so many topics, so many different areas that we've touched on. We have to do another, a part two to this. So if you're up for it, let's do that again.
Totally
And
going.
we'll just really break it down a little bit. So listen, all you lovely people out there, I've been Reggie James and I've been chatting with Mark Can of Growth Warriors. Mark, where can people find you?
Yeah, of course. So they can go on LinkedIn. So just if this isn't already posted on LinkedIn and you're seeing it on a different channel, it's just search for Mark Can, CANN, on LinkedIn. You should be able to find, follow, and connect with me on there. And they can also look at the YouTube channel, which
Mhm.
Reggie, you've been featured on there when we did
I have.
another podcast. So that's just at Growth Warriors on youtube.com /at Growth Warriors. And
Okay.
they can basically find educational content about B2B growth and discussions on there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Well, look, I'll put all of those links in the show notes. It's been great chatting to you. This has been Perspectives. Thanks for tuning in and see you again soon. Thanks. Bye. And that's a wrap.
All good.